in the Youngstown, or as a part of the Youngstown incubator, is the world headquarters. And when I say world headquarters, I really mean world headquarters because they are operating globally, of the fastest growing privately held business-to-business software company in the United States, headquartered in downtown Youngstown, called Turning Technologies. This is a company that has seen exponential growth, that has an audience response project that is integrated with Microsoft products. And the fact that we've seen them come out of the incubator, now grow to their own building. In fact, they are now in the first semi-privately constructed office building in Youngstown in the past several decades, and are already bursting at the seams there. So the Youngstown Business Incubator is doing exceptionally well. Turning Technologies is a company that is most often talked about, but there are half dozen other companies that are in the incubator prepared to graduate. Our challenge is now when those businesses graduate. Now, I don't want you to think I'm anti-suburb, but the last thing I want is for these companies to incubate in downtown Youngstown and then move out to the suburbs. So that is the genesis behind the tech block, is to allow those companies to graduate and then to remain in downtown Youngstown, because there's often a benefit of those companies clustering around one another, sharing technology, sharing resources, sharing expertise. So I'm always excited, and as much as I can tell the story, anyone who is interested, the Jim Kostler, who is actually the executive director, but his title that he's adopted is Chief Evangelist of the Youngstown Business Incubator. And believe me, he is certainly an evangelist telling the good news. But to me, it also shows that while we still have manufacturing as a part of Youngstown's economy, it's still an important part of it. The fact that we're seeing healthcare and service, and now the emergence of technology, and believe me, these are companies that are as innovative and as competitive as companies that you'll find in Silicon Valley on the West Coast. So the Youngstown Incubator is up and doing very well. Again, not immune to the economic troubles that we are having here, but those companies are up and running and doing well, and allowing us to put a new face on Youngstown in the Mahoning Valley, and actually Northeast Ohio.
Mayor, much has been said about your regional activities, but ultimately you're elected by the people living in your city. So how do you take the successes that you've experienced or that you find are on the horizon and communicate those to essentially your board of directors?
And that's a great question, and that's often, it's a fine balancing act, because Youngstown still deals with urban problems of crime and blight and an economic downturn, and it becomes important to address those problems while at the same time, because I certainly would like to be reelected, and while I'm out gallivanting across the region, if the people of Youngstown figure he's spending so much time on these regional issues, we're being neglected. But the key is to show the benefit of the success of the region and tying it to the city of Youngstown. Youngstown is the county seat and is still the largest municipality in the Mahoning Valley region. Youngstown is still the nameplate of the region. So what I've found is the people of Youngstown, they very much got tired of being put upon. They very much got tired of sort of being the brunt of all the jokes and sort of the place that time forgot. So as they see us and myself and others out in the region promoting Youngstown, they very much embraced it. In fact, they found it refreshing to see Youngstown playing such a pivotal role, instead of saying, you know, woe is the city, and boy, we're just going to sit here and sort of wither away and not be involved and engaged. As a matter of fact, I've tried to be very diplomatic in our immediate region as it relates to some of our suburban counterparts. I've tried to be very diplomatic about the relationships and the need to cooperate. I've actually had citizens tell me that I'm maybe being a little too nice and a little too diplomatic, and they want to see the heat turned up a little bit and force that cooperation. Now, again, I don't like being the evil guy and the evil mayor of the city, but again, that's how we've been able to manage it, because we've been make sure that we don't neglect our obligations to our citizens, but at the same time telling them, ladies and gentlemen, we can't stay within our own borders and address these things and think somehow it's going to get better. We're going to have to engage ourselves and plug ourselves into the larger region. That does mean sometimes compromise. As I talked about 50 years ago, Youngstown set the economic agenda. You were either with it or you got run over by it. Now Youngstown certainly is a part of that economic agenda, but we don't have the ability to dictate it or the luxury of dictating it. So there's that little bit of compromise, and at times it becomes a challenge, but that's how we've really made sure that we didn't neglect the citizens of Youngstown. And when those benefits come to the region, we have to make sure that the citizens and the constituents of Youngstown are able to tangibly tap into them.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question on the stimulus package. Can you talk a little bit about how you've perhaps positioned Youngstown for the new forthcoming stimulus package, and what kind of vision you have for the outcomes that might?
Certainly. And I'm excited about the stimulus package, and there's a lot of arguments on either side, but in terms of positioning Youngstown, I don't think that there is, with all due respect to all the cities in Northeast Ohio, I don't think there's a city that has been able to do as much as we've been able to do with the scarcity of resources that we've had to survive with. Particularly, I think where we're well positioned is with respect to the expansion of our business parks. We have, through the years, cobbled together the funds necessary to acquire and remediate these brownfields and put in the necessary infrastructure that would allow private investment to come and to be leveraged. So we have a number of shovel-ready projects as it relates to our business and industrial parks, expanding broadband capacity in those parks, continuing to remediate the brownfields. We also have a number of shovel-ready projects, as I'm sure do all cities, as it relates to the infrastructure that I talked about. We've actually put a plan together that identifies the infrastructure that we are prioritizing as infrastructure that is necessary for the maintenance of the city. But we've also been very candid and say, well, there are other places where the infrastructure is conceivably not going to be needed for the foreseeable future, and we're ready to decommission parts of the city in terms of infrastructure once the population, if we're able to get that population shift. So I'm excited because, again, in fact, I'll be in Washington at a conference next week to talk about the importance of making sure that cities like Youngstown, cities like Cleveland, cities like Detroit are at the forefront and making sure that this money does trickle down. Part of the concern here is that the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National Governors Association are sort of at a tug of war. The governors want the money to come through the state and then trickle down to the cities. The cities are saying, well, if the state gets it, we're not all that confident that we'll see as much of it. And we believe that we're in a unique position to make sure it gets put into the ground and those projects work, because that's what we've been doing for so long. I don't know, none of us know all the details of the infrastructure of the stimulus bill and how the money will trickle down, but I can tell you with 100% certainty that as it relates to water and wastewater infrastructure, as it relates to economic development infrastructure, as it relates to even some of the residential infrastructure, that Youngstown and cities like Youngstown are going to be well positioned. And I think the other thing we have to recognize, we want to be successful so we can convey that to those critics and those cynics of the stimulus bill that's saying it's too large, it's not going to create jobs, that we know how to get these things done. And I think that's unique about cities, and particularly Youngstown. It's not so big where you can't see that difference, but it's not so small that we don't have the capacity and sophistication to know how to get these things done. So, I sort of am a little bit vague on ultimately how it will come down, but you talk to me in 6 or 8 months, and I can point to a number of different things that I think would be useful to other cities as to how to get this money in the ground and how to even leverage it, because that's the other thing. I mean, you're talking about a one-time stimulus on certain things, so we don't want the money to come and then 12 or 18 months later we find ourselves in that same predicament. But it's we're raring to go, believe me.
Mayor Williams, you mentioned how you have quite a few new leaders who are excited to contribute to the revitalization of Youngstown. So I wanted to know, what are you and the city of Youngstown doing to really help encourage and empower new leaders in the community to really use their skills and their talents to contributing and revitalizing Youngstown rather than going to a big city like New York, Chicago, Atlanta?
That's a great question, and it reminds me of a meeting that happened about a year ago where in downtown Youngstown we were doing some improvements, and there's a main street, Federal Street, that runs through downtown Youngstown, and Federal Street for years has had dozens and dozens of trees that lined it. Well, some of the city fathers said, well, we've been doing this for a while, and we're going to rehabilitate the street. As a part of that rehabilitation, a bunch of these trees are going to have to go, and they thought nothing of it. Well, word got to these new leaders that some of this green space in downtown Youngstown was going to be removed as a result of this construction project, and they filled what was otherwise been the most boring and dry planning commission meeting was filled with these new leaders. And believe me, it took some of the city established folks by very much surprised, and it wasn't a pleasant surprise. They were actually offended that these group of do-gooders and these young sort of professionals were in trying to articulate and dictate what downtown should look like and what downtown should feel like. And it actually resulted in a little bit of animated dialogue back and forth. But one of the things that I did is I said, you know what, this is exactly what we need here, an active and engaged. 5 years ago, would you talked about a project in downtown Youngstown, people wouldn't have cared, nobody would have showed up. Put as many trees as you want, take it out as many trees as you want. But the fact that this new group of leaders was there very vocally